Deep beneath the streets of Jerusalem, in tunnels that snake through millennia of history, archaeologists have uncovered chambers that weren't supposed to exist. Rooms carved from solid rock, sealed for centuries, bearing symbols that predate Christ by 1,000 years. And according to ancient texts that most scholars refuse to discuss publicly, these chambers may hold the answer to archaeology's greatest mystery. What if I told you that one of the most powerful objects ever described in human history simply vanished without a trace? Not destroyed, not conquered, not lost to time, but deliberately hidden by those who knew what was coming. For over 2,500 years, the world has been searching for the Ark of the Covenant, a golden chest that ancient texts claim could level cities, part rivers, and strike down anyone who dared approach it without divine permission. But here's what they don't teach you in Sunday school. The Ark wasn't just a religious symbol. According to the biblical accounts, it was a weapon of mass destruction that made armies flee in terror and brought plagues upon entire civilizations. Kings trembled at its mere presence. High priests died if they entered its chamber incorrectly. And then, sometime around 587 BCE, it disappeared so completely that even the Second Temple, rebuilt after the Babylonian exile, never housed it again. Tonight, we're going to walk through discoveries that are rewriting everything we thought we knew about this sacred relic. From underground chambers beneath Jerusalem that match biblical descriptions, to modern intelligence agencies using psychic remote viewing to hunt for its location, the search for the Ark has become stranger than any Hollywood adventure film could imagine. I'm about to show you evidence that will challenge everything you've been told about ancient history, religious artifacts, and the very nature of divine power itself. Because what we're dealing with here isn't just archaeology, it's a mystery that connects the deepest secrets of the ancient world to cutting-edge science, government cover-ups, and discoveries happening right now that could change our understanding of human civilization forever. So, settle in, because by the end of this journey, you'll understand why governments, religious institutions, and archaeological organizations have spent millions of dollars and decades of research chasing shadows in the desert, following clues that lead to locked chambers no one is allowed to enter. The story begins not in some dusty museum, but in a place most people have never heard of, Tel Shiloh, Israel, where in 2025, a team of archaeologists made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the biblical research community. Dr. Scott Stripling, standing in the morning sun over what appeared to be just another pile of ancient stones, realized he was looking at something that perfectly matched the biblical specifications of the tabernacle, the portable dwelling place of God described in Exodus. But this wasn't just another archaeological find. The structure he'd uncovered measured in the exact 2-to-1 ratio specified in ancient texts, oriented precisely east to west, just as the scriptures demanded. Inside this stone foundation, they found something even more extraordinary, a massive interior wall that divided the structure into 2 distinct areas. This architectural detail aligned perfectly with Exodus chapter 26, which describes how the tabernacle's inner sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, was separated from the outer room by a veil. And behind that veil, according to biblical accounts, sat the most powerful object in human history. For nearly 4 centuries, the Ark of the Covenant was kept in this very location at Shiloh. It was here that the golden chest, containing the original stone tablets inscribed by the finger of God himself, served as the earthly throne of divine presence. But the discovery at Tel Shiloh raises a question that archaeologists are afraid to ask out loud. If they've found where the Ark was kept for 400 years, then why are there no traces of it in the archaeological record? The answer may lie in what happened next in the biblical narrative. According to 1 Samuel, chapter 4, the Israelites brought the Ark into battle against the Philistines, believing its presence would guarantee victory. Instead, the unthinkable happened. The Ark was captured by Israel's enemies, and the news of its loss killed Eli the high priest. Instantly he fell backward, broke his neck, and died upon hearing the report. Stripling's team believes they may have even identified the city gate where Eli was sitting when he received that fatal news. But here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. When the Philistines took the ark back to their own cities, disasters began striking everywhere it went. Plagues erupted. Statues of their gods fell and shattered. People died in ways that ancient texts describe as divine judgment. The Philistines, terrified by what they had unleashed, eventually returned the ark to Israel, but something had changed. The object that had once been the centerpiece of Israelite worship had become something else entirely, a weapon so dangerous that even its own people began to fear it. And that's when the cover-up began. Fast forward to the reign of King Josiah, around 621 BCE. Historical records suggest that as the Babylonian Empire grew stronger and the threat to Jerusalem became undeniable, Josiah made a decision that would puzzle historians for millennia. He ordered the ark to be hidden, not destroyed, not taken into battle, but carefully concealed in a location so secret that even the high priests who came after him couldn't find it. The Talmud, the vast collection of Jewish religious discussions and interpretations, contains cryptic references to this hiding place. One passage mentions a priest's suspicion about a tampered stone in a chamber designated for wood storage. Another describes tunnels beneath the Temple Mount that only a few people ever knew existed. But here's what makes this more than just ancient history. In 1982, a man named Ron Wyatt claimed he found exactly what Josiah had hidden. Standing in a cave system beneath Jerusalem, Wyatt declared to the world that he had discovered the Ark of the Covenant itself, along with other biblical artifacts that most people assumed were lost forever. Wyatt's claims were extraordinary. He said he had found not only the golden chest, but also the original stone tablets, Aaron's rod that had budded, and even a pot of manna, the bread from heaven that had sustained the Israelites in the wilderness. But when pressed for evidence, something strange happened. Every time archaeologists, religious authorities, or government officials asked to examine these artifacts, there was always a reason why that wasn't possible. The timing wasn't right. The political situation was too sensitive. Divine guidance suggested waiting. Josias, an archaeologist with the Israel Antiquities Authority, was blunt in his assessment. Ron Wyatt is neither an archaeologist, nor has he ever carried out a legally licensed excavation in Israel or Jerusalem. The academic community dismissed Wyatt's claims as fantasy at best, fraud at worst. But dismissing Wyatt's claims doesn't make the mystery go away. It only deepens it. Because while Wyatt was digging unauthorized tunnels beneath Jerusalem, legitimate archaeological work was uncovering something equally puzzling. The Temple Mount, the most sacred site in Judaism and the third most sacred in Islam, sits atop a labyrinth of chambers, tunnels, and underground spaces that have never been fully explored. Some of these chambers contain architectural features that predate the known history of the site. Others show signs of deliberate concealment, as if someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to hide something of immense value. And in at least one case, excavation work had to be halted not because of what archaeologists found, but because of what they were afraid they might find. The political and religious sensitivities surrounding the Temple Mount make comprehensive archaeological investigation nearly impossible. 3 major world religions consider this ground sacred, and any discovery that challenges established beliefs about the site's history could trigger conflicts that would make international headlines. Which brings us to one of the most intriguing aspects of the Ark mystery, the places where people claim it ended up after disappearing from Jerusalem. In the highlands of Ethiopia, in the ancient city of Axum, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintains that they have possessed the true Ark of the Covenant for over 2,000 years. Not a replica, not a symbolic representation, but the actual golden chest built by Moses in the wilderness. According to Ethiopian tradition, the Ark was taken from Jerusalem by Menelik I, the legendary son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. As the story goes, when Menelik traveled to Jerusalem to meet his father, he secretly took the ark back to Ethiopia with the help of priests loyal to him. But this wasn't theft, it was divine will. God himself had chosen Ethiopia as the new resting place for his earthly throne. The Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's ancient book of glory, describes how the ark's journey to Axum was guided and protected by divine power. A replica was left in the Jerusalem temple to avoid immediate discovery, while the true ark established Ethiopia as a second Zion. Today, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims the ark rests in a small chapel near the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Axum. A single priest, appointed for life, guards the relic. He cannot leave the church grounds, and no one else, not even the head of the Ethiopian church, is permitted to see what lies within that sacred chamber. But in the 1,940 seconds during World War II, one man did see inside that chamber, and what he found raises questions that Ethiopian church authorities still refuse to address publicly. Edward Uhlendorf was a young British Army officer with an unusual background. Born in Switzerland, educated at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, he possessed an intimate knowledge of Ethiopian history and languages that made him invaluable during the British liberation of Ethiopia from Italian occupation. When he walked into that sacred chamber in Axum with armed soldiers behind him, speaking fluent Amharic to monks who insisted he could not enter, Uhlendorf became perhaps the last non-Ethiopian to lay eyes on what the Orthodox Church claimed was the Ark of the Covenant. What he saw shattered the legend. According to Uhlendorf's account, what rested in that holy chamber was identical to replicas found in every other Ethiopian Orthodox church across the country. It wasn't ancient. It certainly wasn't the original ark described in biblical texts. It was, in his words, a typical Ethiopian tabot, a church replica with no distinguishing features that would mark it as the legendary relic. But Uhlendorf's revelation raises a disturbing question. If the Ethiopian church's most sacred claim is based on a replica, what does that tell us about the other locations where people insist the ark has been found? The trail leads us to places most people would never expect. In the mountains of Yemen, the Lemba people of southern Africa maintain oral traditions about carrying a sacred drum called the Ngoma Lungundu, the drum that thunders across the sea from a place called Senna. According to their legends, this drum possessed the same terrible powers described in biblical accounts of the ark. It could kill enemies, bring down walls, and had to be carried using poles to avoid direct contact. The Lemba claim their drum was built from the core of the original ark, after it self-destructed during their journey from the Middle East to Africa. For generations, they preserved this replica in hidden caves until a Swedish-German missionary discovered it in the 1,940 seconds. Today, it sits in the Museum of Human Sciences in Harare, Zimbabwe, another artifact that promises to be the key to the mystery, but somehow never quite delivers the proof. Even more bizarre is the Irish connection. British Israelites in the early 20th century became convinced that the Ark lay buried at the Hill of Tara, the ancient seat of Irish high kings. They believed an Egyptian princess named Tifi had brought it to Ireland in the 6th century BCE, marrying into Irish royalty and establishing a bloodline that connected the biblical covenant to the Celtic kingdoms. The theory was compelling enough that serious excavations were launched at Tara despite protests from Irish nationalists who saw the dig as an assault on their heritage. Maud Gonne, the Irish revolutionary and mystic, led campaigns against the work, while poets like W.B. Yeats denounced the excavations in newspapers. But the diggers found nothing except ancient Irish artifacts and the growing certainty that they had been chasing shadows. Yet perhaps the most intriguing claim comes from the one place most people would never think to look, the Vatican itself. Whispers persist in certain circles that the Catholic Church recovered the Ark during the Crusades and has kept it hidden in the deepest vaults beneath St. Peter's Basilica ever since. The theory suggests that when Crusader knights sacked Jerusalem and gained access to areas that had been forbidden to Christians for centuries, they discovered chambers beneath the Temple Mount that contained artifacts beyond imagination. According to this version of events, the Knights Templar, those mysterious warrior monks who grew fantastically wealthy during their time in the Holy Land, didn't accumulate their riches through banking or trade. They found something in Jerusalem so valuable that it funded their rise to power and ultimately made them so dangerous that the church itself had to destroy them to keep their secrets safe. The evidence for Vatican possession is circumstantial but persistent. The sudden wealth of certain religious orders after the Crusades, the Knights Templars' unexplained knowledge of advanced architecture and engineering, the Vatican's own sealed archives, containing documents that span over 1,000 years but remain closed to outside researchers. But if any of these theories were true, if the Ark really did rest in Ethiopian churches or Irish hills or Vatican vaults, why has no definitive proof ever emerged? Why do all these claims ultimately rely on faith rather than evidence? The answer may be far stranger than any treasure hunt or religious legend. In 1988, the United States Defense Intelligence Agency launched one of the most unusual archaeological investigations in modern history. Using a classified program called Project Sunstreak, they employed psychic remote viewing, the supposed ability to perceive distant locations through extrasensory means to locate the Ark of the Covenant. The declassified documents from this operation read like science fiction. Remote viewers reported the Ark was somewhere in the Middle East, hidden underground, dark and wet, and protected by use of a power unknown to us. The psychic investigators described chambers sealed by methods that defied conventional understanding, guarded by forces that weren't quite natural and weren't quite technological. That the United States military would resort to paranormal methods to locate a biblical artifact reveals just how seriously intelligence agencies take the possibility that the Ark might still exist and might possess capabilities that could revolutionize modern warfare. But while government psychics were probing the astral plane for ancient relics, legitimate archaeologists were making discoveries that brought the search back to solid ground. Lean Rittmeyer, one of the world's most respected archaeological architects, spent decades studying the Temple Mount with scientific precision rather than mystical speculation. Using textual analysis, historical records, and careful measurement of existing structures, Rittmeyer claimed to have identified the exact spot where the Holy of Holies stood during the First Temple period. Not approximately, not somewhere in the general area, but the precise location where the Ark would have rested during the height of ancient Israel's power. His calculations, published in Biblical Archaeology Review, pointed to a specific area within the Dome of the Rock, the Islamic shrine that now occupies the Temple Mount. According to Rittmeyer's research, if the Ark was hidden anywhere in Jerusalem, it would be directly beneath one of Islam's most sacred sites, a discovery that would create religious and political upheaval unlike anything the modern world has ever seen. Which brings us to the most unsettling possibility of all. What if the Ark has already been found, and the discovery is being kept secret, not by treasure hunters or religious fanatics, but by governments that understand exactly what they're dealing with? Think about it for a moment. If an ancient artifact really did possess the kind of power described in biblical texts, if it could generate electrical fields, emit radiation, or manipulate matter in ways that defied conventional physics, would any government simply announce that discovery to the world? Or would they classify it, study it in underground laboratories, and use whatever they learned to develop technologies that could reshape the balance of global power? The truth is, we may already be living in a world where the Ark's secrets have been unlocked. Consider the timing of certain technological breakthroughs in the 20th century. The sudden leap from mechanical computing to electronics, the rapid advancement of nuclear physics, the development of satellite technology and global positioning systems that seemed to emerge from nowhere in the span of just a few decades. What if these weren't just the natural progression of human innovation? What if they were reverse engineered from principles discovered in an object that predated our understanding of advanced physics by 3,000 years? The possibilities become even more disturbing when you consider the classified nature of so much archaeological work in the Middle East. Since World War II, major excavations in biblically significant sites have been conducted not by universities or religious institutions, but by organizations with direct connections to military intelligence agencies. The same governments that developed atomic weapons and space programs have been quietly funding archaeological expeditions in exactly the places where ancient texts suggest the most powerful artifacts might be hidden. And then there are the underground facilities. Beneath Jerusalem, beneath the Vatican, beneath military installations in Nevada and Colorado, massive complexes have been carved from solid rock using technologies that didn't officially exist when construction began. These aren't just storage bunkers or command centers. They're research facilities designed to contain and study objects that might be too dangerous to keep on the surface. The official explanation is always the same: national security, emergency preparedness, protection of historical artifacts. But if you trace the funding sources and construction timelines of these facilities, patterns emerge that point to something far more specific. They're not just hiding conventional weapons or government documents. They're concealing discoveries that would fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of its own past and capabilities. Which brings us to a question that archaeologists and intelligence analysts are asking in private conversations but never in public forums. What if the Ark wasn't just a container for stone tablets? What if it was a technology so advanced that ancient peoples could only describe it in religious terms? The biblical accounts of the Ark's construction contain details that sound remarkably like technical specifications when examined through modern eyes. The precise measurements, the specific materials, the elaborate instructions for handling and transportation, these aren't the vague descriptions you'd expect from ancient mythology. They read like an engineering manual written by people who understood exactly what they were building but lacked the vocabulary to describe it in scientific terms. The Ark was constructed from acacia wood, a material known for its insulating properties, and covered entirely in gold, one of the most effective electrical conductors in existence. It was designed to be carried using wooden poles inserted through gold rings, ensuring that no one would ever make direct contact with the metal surface. The mercy seat on top featured two golden cherubim facing each other, positioned in a way that would create a perfect capacitor if electrical charge was somehow involved. Even more intriguing are the biblical descriptions of the Ark's effects on its surroundings. When carried properly by authorized priests following specific protocols, it was benevolent, parting rivers and bringing victory in battle. But when mishandled or approached incorrectly, it became lethal. People who touched it died instantly. Entire populations suffered from tumors and plagues when it was kept in the wrong location. These aren't the capricious actions of an angry deity, they're the predictable results of a powerful technological device being operated without proper safety measures. Dr. Gerald Hawkins, the astrophysicist who decoded the astronomical alignments of Stonehenge, once remarked that certain ancient structures demonstrate mathematical and engineering knowledge that shouldn't have existed in their time period. The same principle might apply to biblical artifacts. What if the Ark represented technology that was far beyond the civilization that built it? This raises an even more profound question. Where did that technology come from originally? The biblical account suggests it was given to Moses directly by God on Mount Sinai, complete with detailed construction instructions. But what if God in this context was something else entirely, an intelligence so far advanced beyond human understanding that ancient peoples could only interpret its gifts through religious frameworks? The implications are staggering. If the Ark really was a piece of advanced technology, then finding it wouldn't just be an archaeological triumph. It would be the discovery that proves human civilization has been far more complex and sophisticated than we've ever imagined. It would mean that somewhere in our past, we had access to capabilities that we're only beginning to rediscover today. And if that technology still exists, hidden in underground chambers or classified research facilities, then the real question isn't where the Ark is located. The real question is what governments and organizations are doing with the knowledge they've extracted from it. Consider the recent developments in quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and advanced materials science. Technologies that seemed impossible just decades ago are now becoming reality at an accelerated pace. Military contractors are developing weapons systems based on principles that weren't even theoretical when the projects began. Space agencies are launching missions using propulsion methods that shouldn't work according to conventional physics. What if these breakthroughs aren't the result of gradual scientific progress? What if they're based on insights gained from studying artifacts that have been in government possession for decades or even centuries? The pattern becomes even more apparent when you examine the classification levels surrounding certain archaeological discoveries. Sites that should be of purely historical interest are declared off-limits for reasons of national security. Artifacts that pose no obvious military threat are removed from public view and transferred to facilities that don't officially exist. Researchers who ask too many questions about specific discoveries find their funding cut and their access to information severely restricted. This isn't the behavior of organizations protecting ancient pottery or coins. This is the response you'd expect if someone had discovered technology that could revolutionize warfare, energy production, or space travel. The most telling evidence may be found in the technology patents filed by defense contractors over the past 50 years. Buried in technical specifications for radar systems, communication devices, and propulsion mechanisms are principles that seem to have appeared fully formed without the gradual development process that characterizes most engineering advances. Where did these insights come from? How did researchers suddenly understand complex electromagnetic phenomena that had puzzled scientists for generations? The official explanation involves breakthrough moments and genius-level innovation. But the timing and sophistication of these developments suggests something else, entirely reverse engineering of devices that were built using principles far more advanced than anything in our current scientific understanding. If this scenario is accurate, then the search for the Ark of the Covenant isn't really about finding a lost relic. It's about uncovering the source of technologies that are already being used by organizations powerful enough to keep the discovery secret from the rest of humanity. And that brings us to the most disturbing possibility of all. What if the Ark hasn't been lost for thousands of years? What if it's been found, studied, and exploited by groups that have no intention of sharing their discoveries with the world? The evidence suggests that whoever possesses this knowledge has been using it to maintain technological superiority over potential rivals. The same organizations that fund archaeological expeditions in the Middle East also develop the most advanced military systems on Earth. The same governments that classify biblical research also possess weapons capabilities that seem to violate the known laws of physics. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's pattern recognition. When you follow the money, the personnel, and the security classifications, they all point to the same conclusion. Somewhere in the labyrinth of classified programs and black-budget projects, the secrets of ancient technology are being studied and applied in ways that would astonish the general public. But here's the thing about secrets this profound: they can't stay hidden forever. Eventually someone talks. Documents get leaked. Whistleblowers emerge. And when that happens, the revelation won't just change our understanding of history. It will force us to confront the possibility that everything we think we know about human civilization, technological development, and the nature of reality itself has been carefully managed to conceal truths that would fundamentally alter the balance of power on this planet. The search for the Ark of the Covenant continues not because it's lost, but because the implications of finding it are too massive for any single organization to handle alone. And as archaeological technology becomes more sophisticated and government secrecy becomes harder to maintain, we may be approaching a moment when the truth can no longer be contained. When that day comes, the world will have to grapple with discoveries that make every science fiction scenario seem mundane by comparison. Because if the biblical accounts are even partially accurate, we're not just dealing with an ancient religious artifact. We're dealing with technology that could rewrite the rules of physics, energy, and human potential itself. And that's exactly what happened in 2025, when Dr. Scott Stripling's team made their announcement about the tabernacle discovery at Tel Shiloh. Within hours of the news breaking, certain archaeological journals received calls suggesting the findings needed additional verification before publication. University funding committees suddenly developed concerns about the political implications of biblical archaeology. Research permits that had been routine for decades became mired in bureaucratic delays. But this time, something was different. The discovery was too public, too well documented, and too significant to simply disappear into classified archives. Videos of the excavation had already circulated on social media. Independent researchers had photographed the site. International news outlets had picked up the story. For the first time in decades, a discovery that could rewrite biblical history was happening in full view of the global public, and the response from certain quarters was telling. Rather than celebrating a breakthrough that confirmed ancient texts with remarkable precision, powerful institutions seemed more interested in controlling how the information was presented and interpreted. The question isn't whether these organizations are hiding something. The question is what they're hiding and why they consider it so dangerous that even positive archaeological evidence needs to be carefully managed. Consider what would happen if the public learned that biblical accounts of advanced technology were literally accurate. If people discovered that ancient civilizations possessed capabilities that modern science is only beginning to understand. If it became clear that human history has been deliberately obscured to maintain existing power structures, the implications would extend far beyond archaeology or religion. Energy companies would face questions about suppressed technologies that could revolutionize power generation. Defense contractors would have to explain why breakthrough weapons systems seemed to emerge from nowhere. Space agencies would need to address how certain propulsion principles were developed decades before the theoretical framework supposedly existed to support them. And that's just the beginning. If the Ark really does represent technology beyond our current understanding, then finding it wouldn't just validate ancient texts. It would prove that human civilization has been far more advanced than we've been led to believe. It would suggest that knowledge we consider cutting edge has actually been available for thousands of years, carefully controlled by organizations that profit from scarcity and ignorance. The financial implications alone would be staggering. Entire industries built on the assumption that certain technologies don't exist would collapse overnight. Patent systems designed to protect innovations would become meaningless if the real innovations were reverse-engineered from ancient artifacts. Economic models based on resource limitations would crumble if unlimited energy sources were suddenly revealed to be possible. But perhaps the most profound impact would be psychological. Humanity would have to confront the possibility that we're not the pinnacle of technological achievement, that our ancestors weren't primitive cave dwellers struggling with bronze tools and wooden wheels, that the progression from ancient to modern isn't a story of gradual advancement, but of deliberate suppression and controlled release of knowledge that was once widely available. This shift in perspective would fundamentally alter how people view authority, progress, and human potential. If governments and corporations have been sitting on world-changing technologies for decades, what else have they been hiding? If ancient texts contain literal descriptions of advanced science, what other myths might actually be historical records? The search for the Ark of the Covenant has become a symbol of these larger questions. It represents humanity's quest to understand its own past and potential. Every tunnel explored beneath Jerusalem, Every chamber discovered in forgotten ruins, every artifact that doesn't fit conventional timelines, brings us closer to answers that could transform civilization. And those who would prefer to keep the current system intact are running out of ways to maintain control over information. Satellite technology can peer through solid rock to reveal hidden chambers. Ground-penetrating radar can map underground structures with unprecedented precision. DNA analysis can trace bloodlines and migration patterns that confirm or contradict official histories. Most importantly, global communication networks make it nearly impossible to suppress discoveries the way they were suppressed in previous generations. When Ron Wyatt made his claims in the 1,980 seconds, debunking them was relatively simple. Control access to the sites, discredit the researcher, and wait for public attention to move elsewhere. The truth is out there, buried beneath layers of classification, religious tradition, and institutional control. Whether the Ark of the Covenant rests in Ethiopian chapels, Vatican vaults, or underground chambers beneath Jerusalem, one thing is certain: the search for this ancient relic has revealed something far more significant than any single artifact could ever be. It's exposed the lengths to which powerful organizations will go to control humanity's understanding of its own past and potential. The real treasure isn't gold-covered wood and stone tablets. It's the knowledge that our ancestors may have possessed capabilities we're only beginning to rediscover, and that the future of human civilization may depend on whether we're brave enough to uncover what's been hidden from us for thousands of years.